Good morning. Thank you, Gareth, and thank you, Kevin. Just to add to Kevin's earlier comments around welcome to RBS. We're very pleased to be here and to hosting this event today. My focus here is going to be around security, and just before I start, I wouldn't mind just taking a straw poll of those in the audience that have security within their remit, either directly or indirectly. Can I just, hands up? So I'll stick to the script because I'll be found out then if not. My role, it was described there as Head of Security and Resilience. It's actually changed. It's now Head of Customer Security. And if I was standing here 2 years ago, I'd be talking about our role in protecting the bank and our continuity. But our focus has shifted quite a bit towards how do we protect our customers as well as protecting the bank. And a lot of what we've been talking about in the last 18 months has been around cybersecurity and fraud. And I'll touch on it. I'm going to talk more about the tangible physical security today and our approach in RBS. But talking to a couple of people outside earlier, I could talk about cybersecurity and the impact on continuity, whether it's destructive malware, whether it's disruptive malware that we're going to kind of experience now and for the foreseeable future. But I'll stick to the script. I'll talk about physical security, how it impacts RBS and how we consider the threat, how we respond to the threat. And then in the second half of the presentation, I'll talk about how we respond to a major incident. We're in Bishopsgate campus. We're very close to Liverpool Street. It's in our minds that we've got 10,000 people in this area pretty much every day coming to work and leaving from work. And how do we protect them when they're here? And how do we protect our suppliers and our customers who come on site, our customers in branches? So without wanting to sound like Julie Andrews and Sound of Music sing-along, let's start at the very beginning. So where we start in RBS is with our threat assessment, and we look at the security threats across a fairly wide spectrum. Where we see the main areas at the moment is on cyber. We're seeing disruptive cyber attacks against the bank occasionally. We've got measures in place to stop that. It's about notoriety. It's about just malicious intent. But we have them, and we're dealing with them, responding to them. Data theft and espionage is definitely on the increase. We've seen major hacks. Whether you get payment information or customer information, what you're holding, and certainly as a bank, what you're holding is really important and attractive to whether it's organised crime gangs or opportunistic individuals or indeed kind of nation-state organisations. Our main issue is really around fraud and e-crime. Organised crime gangs don't really target the bank. They tend to target customers. They use lots of different social engineering techniques to get information and to exploit that. And it's very, very lucrative. And when I come on in a second and talk about branch robberies and sort of ATM attacks, I do wonder why folk bother, because this is far more lucrative, very difficult to detect, very difficult to prosecute. Terrorism, political violence, we see that as green. We don't see the bank or the financial services sector being a target directly. We see ourselves probably being more of a secondary target depending on the location. If something was to kick off in Bishopsgate, as I mentioned earlier, or a major transport hub, we've got a lot of people coming through these hubs. And how do we deal with that? Physical crime, it's amber. We've seen a bit of a tick up on fairly desperate crimes, and I'll come on to that later. We've had a time with protest and campaign activity. I'm sure many in the room have experienced something similar. 2009, 2010, RBS probably wasn't flavour of the month, and I'm not saying that we are now. But we had a lot of attention from activists, from protest groups, and I'll describe some of that as well. But we've become a little bit more boring probably, and we're more thinking through who we're banking and what they're doing, and do we become a secondary target again rather than a direct target. And then our people security and our executive is, at the moment, we'd rate it as green. So that's where we start. How do we kind of figure out whether we're green, whether we're on the rise? Well, we've got quite a good-sized team looking at the threats and breaking things down to a fairly granular level. So if I look at one of our threat maps, this is physical security and resilience. To pick out a couple in there, I've mentioned terrorism. In our view, the likelihood is pretty low, despite the fact that the threat level is severe across the UK. It's at the second highest level, it has been since August. The one that's got our attention probably is ATM crime. From a physical security point of view, we've seen different forms of attack, from skimming attacks on ATMs through to JCBs coming in and taking out the wall, taking away the kit. And actually, of late, we've seen ATM gas attacks. And I'll describe how that manifests itself in a second. We protect our people, but actually we tend to get more incidents of customers being attacked. So they leave branch, they don't necessarily alter their route, they don't alter the time of a deposit, and they may be subject to some sort of reconnaissance. They're followed and they're attacked in the car park. It could be the monthly wages, it could be the takings from the bank holiday weekend. But that's kind of where we are. And then in the middle there, we've got kidnap and extortion. Probably don't associate it with the bank, but actually we do have some threats of kidnap within particular areas around Ireland, border towns in particular, where there's an approach where a branch manager's family could be taken kidnapped and held at ransom under threat of life. The branch manager has to do certain things, obtain cash, pay the criminals, and then their family's released. It doesn't happen very often, but it's something that certainly keeps us awake at night. Touching some of the resilience ones, nature, internal services failure. RBS had a significant event in June 2012. 24/7 business continuity kicked in, probably for 2 to 3 weeks in getting the bank back on track. It's probably the most exposed I've felt as a bank employee dealing with that incident at the time, and really tested the bank. So RBS in numbers, just to what we're looking at, what we're trying to protect, what we're trying to manage. Our footprint globally has changed quite a bit. We are becoming more UK-centric. We're withdrawing from certain countries. The bank's changed shape considerably in the 5 years I've been here. But we still have somewhere around 115,000 employees. We've still got somewhere close to 2,000 branches across the UK. Each one of these could be an attractive target. We spend a lot of time trying to do the analytics, to look at the intelligence, to figure out which branches are most likely to be subject of a raid. Which ATMs, of the 5,000 ATMs, which ones are most likely to be the subject of a gas attack. And there's lots of things we can look at. We can look at the geography. We can look at the design of the branch. We can look at how easy it is for a crime gang to strike and then get back on the motorway network, these sort of things. But it can also be very random. So you can do your best, but it can still be a very random attack, and I've got an example of that coming up shortly. We've got 90 offices. Like this one, we'd refer to them as multi-occupied premises, with anything up to 2,500, 3,000, 4,000 people. We do have fairly extensive flexible working, lots of people working from home, particularly in London and bigger cities. And the areas that are, if you like, our kind of crown jewel assets are around the data centres that we have and our cash and coin centres. The gangs, again, organised crime gangs, don't tend to go after cash centres now. There was some significant raids, multi-million-pound losses, going back probably 10, 12 years. The banks responded, the cash handlers responded by really strengthening the defences, and they're less of a target now, touch wood. Jewel heists probably in Hatton Garden are more of an attractive target. So some examples. Yeah, we still get robberies, but they're well down. Example there, Matlock, armed robbery. We've got our defences in place. We've got our CCTV. We've got our prevention tools. But actually, it's all about making it less attractive and target hardening for us. Having technology within the branch network, having automatic deposit machines, automatic telling machines, time locks and safe. The average loss from a branch robbery is probably around about £2,500, £3,000. Now, there's not a lot to go around if it's an organised gang, and I've seen cases where an organised gang has broken into the bookie shop next door, who's going through renovations, been there all weekend, knocked through the wall, came in the Monday morning, right through the wall to staff, very alarming for staff, and got away with £450. They were tracked down and they were sentenced to between 10 and 12 years. So crime doesn't pay in that situation. We've got some but it's not just about organised crime gangs. We've got some fairly desperate people who will pass in notes, that kind of fallen in hard luck. But our response, regardless of whether it's a serious-looking criminal or somebody coming in, our response to staff is always passive compliance. You just never know. Cash is secondary. And with anything we do, our priority is all about, firstly, safeguarding people, whether that's our customers, whether it's our staff, whether it's about our suppliers. Secondly, continuity of operations, keeping things running for our customers. And thirdly, the protection of our assets, and it comes a distant third. Kirriemuir on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side there. Kirriemuir, famous for three things probably. J.M. Barrie, Peter Pan, was born there. For those that remember AC/DC's original lead singer, Bon Scott, he was born in Kirriemuir, believe it or not. And one of our gas attacks was in Kirriemuir. That's the third. Why Kirriemuir? Why would Kirriemuir be attacked? Again, let's come back to that. We've got 5,000 ATMs. Why would they attack Kirriemuir? Well, actually, now the criminals have been found that did it. Between Liverpool and Aberdeen, where there's money, there's drugs. So there's a drug run between Liverpool and Aberdeen. On the way back, Kirriemuir's not far from Aberdeen, a bit of extracurricular activity. So the gas attack is something that's been seen in Australia, it's been seen in Europe, and it came over to the UK probably 2 or 3 years ago. Less about losing the money, but a big public safety issue. The approach that the gangs take is to fill the ATM with just the right amount of gas, and to then sort of put in a barbecue electronic ignition, stand around the corner, press bang, the back of it sounds like a kind of Michael Caine blowing the back of the doors off type situation, but blow the back of the doors off, and they pick a branch that's got glass from floor to ceiling, burst through the glass in, take out the cartridges, and they've gone. Extremely expensive to repair, massive damage to the building, a public safety concern, and that ATM's out of action probably for 4 weeks, so it's got a kind of long-lasting impact for the community and our customers as well. So what do we do about it? We gas suppression kits, enhanced CCTV, but which ATMs are going to be attacked? That's the challenge for us. Aside from the physical crime, I mentioned protests and direct action. When I came into the bank 2010, within the first 2 weeks, we had 500 protesters on site at our major offices in Edinburgh under the banner of Climate Camp. This wasn't really about the bank, it was about the bank's funding of business that was involved in tar sands in Canada and the extraction of oil. Probably not the most environmental thing to do, and it became the focus of attention for protesters. We had 500 protesters on site, they camped out, they had a day of action on the Monday. It became quite violent on the Sunday. We had a ring of police right around the Goulburn campus, but many windows were smashed. They tried to get into the building with intent to burn. So it was a big deal. But the bank's approach to all this was to be as tolerant as possible, almost welcoming. The first night they came on site, I remember a call around, they've asked for a hose pipe with water. That's fine, give them water. Be very tolerant, be very accommodating. They're here for the duration, let it happen. Had it been 10 years before, we'd have probably gone for an injunction, and it would have been very, very messy. But actually being tolerant, allowing them to protest, and okay, Sunday was a challenge for us, made life quite easy. The campaign didn't get a lot of media attention, and they moved on. Russell Brand, a few months ago, was a guest in Bishopsgate, unexpected guest, fair to say, and he'll probably appear in a film at some point with some of our colleagues. But again, let's deal with it, let's understand the situation, let's not turn it into more than it is and try and remove the oxygen of media attention around that. But it's something we face, and we faced UK Uncut, we've faced Anonymous, we've faced Occupy at various times in our branches. But again, our approach to staff is to be tolerant, to let them protest. If it gets in the way of business, if it gets in the way of serving customers, if it gets in the way of some of our security procedures, locking up cash at the end of the day, then we can do something, we can ask them to leave, or we can call the police. But we would be pretty tolerant up to that point. A very busy slide, and I'm sure everyone's got their kind of own views of how they respond to this, but our view, regardless of the threat, whether it's cyber, whether it's physical, whether it's fraud, whether it's data loss, our response is a kind of layered series of controls. That we understand the direction we're in, we understand what our appetite's going to be, we understand our tolerance for events, or for fraud losses or whatever. The situational awareness, we're fortunate that we've got investment in security and resilience, that we have an intelligence team, and their role is to scour cross-sector, understand what's happening, understand what threats are happening in oil and energy that could well happen to migrate to financial services sector in due course, and how do we deal with it, and what's the vulnerability. So the whole intelligence and threat assessment part comes under our situational awareness. We then move into prevent, detect and respond. So we do everything we can to prevent things from happening, if we can, but bad things will happen, and it's a message for the board. If I go back to cyber again and say, we will be hit by cyber attacks. No one's immune from cyber attacks. I think FBI recently commented that corporate organisations, corporates have either been hit by a cyber attack or they don't know they have. But no one is immune. And we get that message across. We're then looking at detection and what do we do to detect something's happened and to respond quickly where we can. And then the response side of things, 24/7 readiness to respond, to exercise, to train, to be very clear around accountabilities and delegated authorities from board and so on, so that we can actually respond and mitigate any particular risk or impact to business. And right through everything is about how do we communicate, and I'll mention that in the example I come on to in a second. So, it might not be 9:15 exactly, but I thought it would be useful just to kind of call up an example of a significant incident. I won't kind of describe what it would be, but we're in the centre of London. We've got 10,000 people. The threat level is severe. So what we would do is kind of break things into time chunks. At the very beginning, we'd set what our principle here is and come back to the point that we're all about keeping our customers and colleagues safe from physical attack, preserve life above everything else. That's our priority. We'll then worry about business continuity, getting our business back on track for our customers, and we'll then worry about any damage to the assets, but very much downstream. The first 5 minutes for us is all about rapid information gathering, keeping things probably to quite a tight, small group, not getting carried away with what we're seeing on social media, but trying to establish a contact within law enforcement, if we can, at the right time. So if something happened in Bishopsgate, we've got a contact in City of London Police. Tell us the authoritative voice of what's actually happening here. What are we facing? Begin to gather that information and begin to coordinate as an organisation what we're about. So the gathering of intelligence in that first 5 minutes is crucial. Understanding and having a good inventory of your assets is important. So within this location, what buildings do we have? What points of access do we have? How many people will be on site at this time in the morning, typically? Where are our points of access? And work on that. We've got an approach in RBS, and I'll mention it through this example, of our Chief Building Officer. This isn't somebody that's necessarily got an FM background or a property background or a security background, but it's somebody senior within that building that has the authority to take action, that has the authority to read the situation on the ground and to make decisions. Now, whether that's evacuation, lockdown, but that CBO has that delegated authority to act on the ground and to see things. Obviously keeping in touch with the security area that we've got at the centre and the major incident room that's beginning to kind of get invoked here, but we would look to the CBO in each building to kind of act. And as I come to the end of this, as we've gone through exercising with CBOs, it's quite a responsibility. It's not, it's not part of their job description necessarily. So they've got a degree of nervousness, and they've got some very relevant questions that we've gone about answering, and some challenges, and I'll come on to that shortly. Escalation, beginning the communication, again, keeping it quite tight, but getting a heads up out there to executive, to key contacts that need to know that something is going on. They'll very, very quickly see it on BBC or Sky News, but here's our position on it at this moment in time, and we'll inform you. But get that heads up, get that heads up out quickly. What gives me confidence that we would do that? Well, it comes back to our exercising that we do. When we geared that up, we probably did 2 or 3 times as much exercising as we would do in advance of the Olympics in Scotland for the Commonwealth Games. So there's a focus there to do something that, and a sense that you're moving into a period of more heightened risk, more likelihood of interruption of business, or more likelihood of attack. Now, clearly, Olympics passed over as a huge success, but that exercising wasn't lost. Lots of good things come out of it, and it's something we now do on a regular basis, whether it's for an event like this or an event of a major breach or a cyber attack. go back to the point of having the inventory, all your, well, in our case, the property assets, understanding them and being able to visualise them in a control room to know what's actually, the decisions being taken, are they the right decisions. And then this CBO program I mentioned. So in the first 5 minutes, it's about rapid information gathering, quick escalation, and understanding that localised delegated authority. We then move into the golden hour, where things can go very right or very wrong. Priority is maintaining this coordination and assessment. We're then into our incident management response. So again, I'm sure your organisations will have something similar, that you've got bronze, silver, gold, depending on the gravity of the situation. But these are convened very quickly. But at this point in time, it's probably still kept quite a small group, those that need to act, those that need to do things, before we begin to understand the impact on business. Our intelligence picture is growing through this period, and our threat picture is growing as well. So is it an impact on buildings? Is it a rising tide incident? Is it now contained? So where are we, and what's likely to happen? And at this point in time, we're beginning to kind of mobilise our CBOs. If it's in multi-city or it's localised, we're kind of managing that community. Our control centre's up and running. They're geared up. They're focused now on, this is a priority incident. Let's divert calls, deal with non-essential items, and be there to respond and to help the business. And then we begin to initiate accounting for staff. Where is everybody? What's our contact strategy? Is it through call cascade? Is it through other technical means of beginning to account for everybody who should be at work that day? And that's become more complex for us because of the extent of home working and remote working, and the ability to work from different locations as well. So who should be in the building? We've got our physical security passes. We've got details of who's logged on and working. But is it accurate? And will Tuesday be the same as next Tuesday or Wednesday? So it's much more a complex area for us now. Again, prevention, what gives me confidence we're there. Exercising, and importantly, doing a lot of testing with our guarding. An event like a major terrorist attack within this area, you're really looking at your frontline guards to act and to respond and to use their eyes and ears and act with initiative. And that was quite a change for our guarding, who would typically look for instruction or direction and have the confidence they were acting correctly. But if you've got an event coming up Bishopsgate and you've got people in the building, that decision to lock down is with the guard. And that was a big change for us in the bank. 1020 onwards, medium-term response. Again, communication and coordination is our key watchwords here. At this point in time, we're probably reasonably confident we've got a handle of what's going on, what we're facing, roughly where we are with our people. Decisions being taken on events in the vicinity on that day, on deliveries, contact with key suppliers. So they're kind of keeping the bank going from a security, from a facilities management point of view, is kind of under control, or at least some big decisions have been taken on what we need to do. It's now about how do we communicate out to colleagues, how do we communicate out to the wider bank of what's happened. In time, if there has been a significant impact on our service to customers, then what's our angle with the regulators? What do we need to tell them? Are they coming to us asking us for what's been the impact if it's a kind of cross-bank issue? Or, we've got a statement ready, we're quite prepared to say this is where we are, and it's a kind of controlled and managed message. I mentioned comms, and I'll come on to comms when I talk about the things that we struggle with at times and have had to kind of work hard at to get right. What comms do we go out through a public address system to staff? What do we say? Who do we leave it to? What's the script? Can we agree the words? We don't want to alarm, but at the same time we want to reassure. Very, very tricky to get that right balance. And how do we communicate to senior management who may be wanting to do something more than we think is right? We were talking earlier around the riots in August 2011. Before things like the CSSC were up and running, and the communication and getting that authoritative voice out to business wasn't as well established. I remember being on an incident call, late one, probably day 2 of the event, and things had mushroomed. There was rioting in Manchester, and everyone was saying, well, there's going to be a major riot heading towards our cash centres in in Salford and in Manchester, so therefore we're going to evacuate 2,000 people. We're going to put down tools and stop working and say, well, what's the source? Well, the source is somebody tweeted on Twitter, or somebody's put something on Facebook and it's now been corroborated. Well, it's not been corroborated. Let's go to the authoritative voice, figure out what's what. Actually, there's nothing going to happen in the next 12 hours. Keep the building going. But not having that at the time was difficult. Having a better mechanism now with law enforcement, it certainly helped things. But that decision locally to say, I'm going to evacuate the building or I'm going to put down tools, back then, we'd have had a major impact on our cash deliveries, major impact on branches. The decision was wrong to evacuate, keep going. So that's kind of ongoing. Certainly we're at the point of time of looking at our BC plans, figuring out what is business critical. We're looking at our work area recovery sites, getting them ready if we had to get them ready, figuring out with instructionists the remaining staff. And at this point in time, it could be running for several days, so you've probably got a small team who have been fairly core, whether it's from a security point of view or a BC point of view, but have you got your shift rotas right? Are people alert enough to make decisions if they've been working non-stop for 48 hours? Are you refreshing people? Are you turning people over? Is there a good handover process in there if it's a long-running incident? Do we need to, as a bank, do we need to look up and step up guarding? If it's not because, and quite often we do this, that Christmas is a good example where the threat of physical security attacks is heightened. We don't know which branches are going to be targeted, but we know there's a heightened risk. So we may organise additional guarding or mobile guarding, and it's not so much about security measure, but it's about reassuring staff, and they feel more confident and comfortable having heightened guarding presence. The prevention side, again, we're looking at our business continuity policy, our tested plans, and everything to do with our sites and our capability. I mean, our reliance on work area recovery is much reduced in the last 5 years than it was previously, and this is again testing for the Olympic Games. We got to a point that we could probably support somewhere north of 30,000 colleagues working remotely and using a remote login and pretty much doing everything they could do from the office in their home. So that was a good test for us. Just to touch on some of the learning points, I mentioned before, the CBO, the Chief Building Officer role, is attached to somebody's role. It tends to be an executive senior manager within a building. But faced with the decision, what do I do? How do I protect life? How do I protect business continuity? There's some big decisions in there and some things that they had to think about quite carefully. But the common topics that come up for us were around evacuation plans. So if the instruction from the police or from the control centre in the bank is you need to evacuate to a safe area, if you take a building like 280 Bishopsgate, we're in today, there's glass everywhere. And yes, we've got anti-spall film all over the place, but is there a safe area that we can take staff to? And knowing where that is, knowing how you can get people to it, knowing where to move away from the threat is key. And it's something that needs to be documented and tested. Internal building communications has been an issue for us where it may have been a kind of lower level incident, but staff are looking at the window, they can see it. We had an event probably about a year ago. There was a multiple stabbing in the middle of the day outside this building. I think 2 people were actually killed. So people are coming around and going backwards and forwards in the building and word spreading fast. What is this? Is it just a random incident or is it something more serious? So what message do you give out over the tannoy? What message do you give to staff? Stay in the building at this point in time. Police are on site. Don't be alarmed. We've got things under control. We've moved to a lockdown state in the building and we'll control your entry and exit. We'll keep you posted. And keeping you posted is really key. Beyond that, what message are we giving to the CBO and what message are we giving to senior management? There might be more information that we have to give to people to say, you might want to think about sending non-critical staff home. We'll make that call at 4 o'clock. But just keeping people appraised is really key. Absence of CBOs. So great, we take a lot of pride in having this CBO network. We spend a lot of time training and educating and exercising them. But they're on holiday. What's the backup plan? Where's the deputy? Is the deputy informed? Does the deputy feel they can make the decision as well? So that community of CBOs becomes quite broad, and please don't go on holiday at the same time if we can avoid that. Assembly points. In an ideal world, you've got a situation outside that you've got assembly points 500 metres if you have to evacuate, 500 metres from the building, ideally north, south, east, west if you can, moving away from the trouble, but not always practical and not always possible. So we've gone for a minimum of 2 assembly points outside our buildings, typically north and south. And again, exercising and testing these and will they work, and being very careful in a rising tide event that you're not evacuating staff into a danger area. It kind of goes without saying. Play a lot of store in the delegated authorities and people feeling accountable for their role. That localised decision making being absolutely key, and that starts with the guard on the front door I mentioned earlier, and linked into the second point around lockdown. In the horrible scenario of you've got an event happening in front of your eyes, you can see it through the glass windows, you've taken a decision to lock down, it's lunchtime, and you've got 3 members of staff rushing up to the building to get back in. Lockdown's lockdown, unfortunately, and that's our message for guards. And if they've made the decision and they can document why they've made that decision, fine. But lockdown is lockdown. So, bit of a focus on security, hopefully touched on some of the facilities management issues in there around suppliers and that, if you like, transference of responsibility and delegated authority to those in the front line, our front office staff or our guarding. Really, really key if something is to go wrong. That's me. I'm very happy to take any questions on cybersecurity, physical security, fraud, and I'll do my best on facilities management as well. But thank you very much for listening.
Any questions for Alasdair?
Hi.
One question on assembly points. You've mentioned you've thought about 2 places in this building. If there's an instance, for example, at Liverpool Street,
Yep.
multiple buildings could be.
I can hear you, it's okay.
I'll speak loud.
Yeah.
Multiple buildings could be evacuated to the same assembly point area.
Yep.
Have you thought what would happen in that situation?
Yeah, we have. I mean, we've spent, again, a lot of this came through the Olympics to that very point, that if something material happened in the location, that you've got buildings spilling out all over the place. It's something we've taken up with the landlords in Spitalfields around what's Plan B, and we've developed up some Plan Bs as well. It's a very valid point. There does come the point that says, look, do we really want to evacuate? I personally think we would typically evacuate in that sort of situation and keep people safe within the building. You know, we've got lockdown facilities in place, and we've got the shutdown facilities in place as well. We'd kind of move people upstairs. But yeah, I get your point.
Les, you had a question?
Alasdair, you mentioned, and we were talking about this earlier on this morning, CSSC. I think that's something that others may not know about. Could you explain what that does and the benefits to companies?
Yeah, so CSSC, to expand it, is cross-sector safety and security communications. And this was born out of the, if you like, fairly haphazard response to the riots in London and further north in August 2011, where businesses were uninformed, they were acting on their own judgment. There was a lack of an authoritative voice. And what CSSC does, and there's an equivalent now in other parts of England, and one was set up in Scotland for the Commonwealth Games, is to have a network of what we refer to as ISLs, an industry sector lead. So every sector would be represented, so whether it's financial services or pharmaceuticals or construction. If something's happening and there's a need to have a bridge call very quickly, that these ISLs are convened. They're informed by the authoritative voice. Now that would typically be law enforcement, but it could be government, it could be transport, it could be somebody that's just going to tell you exactly what's happening and what you need to do. And then it's up to that ISL to cascade to their members, if you like, rapidly of what they need to do. And to use it as a kind of two-way communication tool. It was I was probably more involved in the one in Scotland after the Olympics, and the level of trust, if you like, there was a kind of questionnaire done with business to say, trust is probably the wrong word, but how would you engage with the police? Would you engage with the police? Would you ask a question? And it was quite low. You know, it was kind of 40% would do our own thing. After the Commonwealth Games and after involvement in the CSC, that was up around 85, 90%. So a big success, and a great example actually of public-private partnership.
Very well. Right, thanks very much, Alasdair.
Thank you.
Who's FM Director for UCB Pharmaceutical Company. When you ask questions at the end, can you please just announce who you are in the spirit of sharing and networking? Okay, Les.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if I'm switched on yet. Am I switched on? Can you hear me okay? Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. So, as Kevin said, I'm Les O'Gorman. I am, looking for the flicker. I am head of FM at UCB. So, UCB, we're not a Christian broadcasting organisation. For those of you that are familiar with the Sky remote control, and you mistakenly hit up one, and you go to channel whatever it is, and assuming you've got the adult channels blocked, which I'm sure most of you have. Some of you not very confident on that one, so that's a bit worrying. So UCB, we're a Belgian-owned pharmaceutical company. So we are a mid-sized pharma company. So we specialise in two key areas really, central nervous system issues and immunology. In terms of our products, if you have epilepsy, rheumatoid arthritis, you'll probably take one of our products. If you are a hay fever sufferer, Zyrtec is one of our products. It's a bit of a battle in our house. My wife works for GSK, so she buys Piriton, and I bring home Zyrtec. And we trust my son to tell us which is the best and which is the most effective. So mid-sized company, we're not a GSK and we're not a startup, so we're somewhere in the middle. So about 10,000 people employed globally, headquartered, as I said, in Belgium. I operate the UK portfolio, which are 3 operational buildings in Slough. So we've got laboratories, we've got offices, and we have a legacy building in Cambridge, which we completely sublet. So we are, in the FM team, property team, we are service provider and landlord as well. So that's quite an interesting challenge. So today I'm going to talk to you about data and intelligence and data and information, distinction between the two. I'm then going to talk a little bit about how I think we should use that in providing better services to our customers and improving resilience in our businesses. And then I'm going to finish off on a couple of case studies, also touching on how we're working with NJW as well, with Nigel at the back and his team in particular. So, moving on. I'm going to keep an eye on the time so we don't run over. So, one of my favourite images, the glass overflowing. So, I'm going to try and be a little bit contentious, so you can throw things at me, heckle, whatever you want, or ask me questions at the end. I think we're obsessed by data, FM. We just record everything we possibly can, and we produce lots and lots of reports, most of which circulate within FM, and maybe up the chain a little bit. How much gets to our customers? Do our customers really care? Are we measuring the right things? Are we collecting the right sorts of data? So, interesting quote there from Iron Mountain survey, which I think is quite telling. 10% think that their data is actually, they're getting the most from their data. And that's quite staggering and quite disappointing, I think. So where are we going wrong? I think basically we are focusing too much on this data, and we're ignoring what our customers need and what our customers want and what our business needs to retain its resilience and to keep operational. So if you look at the sort of trend in FM, again, this is me being controversial, so Gareth can kick me as I walk past him. So basically, I think what we're doing is we're following an agenda that's driven by many of the big organisations. So we're looking at offshoring, call centres, help desk systems, and we're actually losing contact with our customers. And our customers really are why we're here. And nobody would disagree with that at all. And if you look at what we're doing as well is we're saying increasingly, have you raised a ticket? Have you contacted the help desk? And customers hate that. They want you to take their problem off their hands. So in this pursuit of data and recording things, we're actually providing, I would argue, less quality or lower quality services. We're getting less engagement with our customers, and we're getting our customers feeling, I'm a number, I'm a commodity. And how often do they get an email saying your job's been completed and it hasn't been completed? So we're actually setting ourselves up to fail in many respects. So I think this obsession with data, I think, is basically distracting us. We have limited time, we have limited resource, so we have to target that in the best way we possibly can. And we should be doing that in a way that delivers benefit to the business every time. Great thing when I was doing some research for this is an expression called HIPPO, which I hadn't heard of before, highest paid person in the organisation, which I think is quite apt. And basically, we're directed often by the director of FM or the chief executive or the CFO. And is that right? And should we be challenging that HIPPO? I mean, don't call them HIPPO because you'll probably get disciplined. But should we be challenging that person and saying, look, you know, you want us to do this, and it could be a financial agenda. We should start looking at how our customers interact with us, and what services they want from us. So I think that's really key. And I think it's about what the data tells you and about what works. And I think that's key as well. So if you look at data, and again, this is, I'm going to start talking a little bit now about what we capture and how we capture data. There are different sort of categories of data or different aspects of data. And I think we're actually very good at collecting volume in FM. We collect an awful lot of data in FM. Speed, we're pretty good as well because we have good systems. So that's pretty good. Variety, I would say we're not very good at that. And we'll come on to that on my next slide. And the thing we're probably worst at is analysis. So we collect this data, we get volumes of it, and we get the speed. We get it from generally single sources. It tends to be the help desk. It tends to be the team on the ground. We're not very good yet harnessing the new tools, the social media tools, which I don't know about your companies. My company, we've got our intranet page is now, you can like and follow things on it and news articles from different departments. Personally, I find that a bit of a turn-off because I do Facebook, I do Twitter, and that's enough in my private life. To do it at work, I'm not sure I want to do it. But there are customers in our organisations who love that. And particularly the younger generation, the millennials and the Generation X's and some of the Ys as well. So we need to recognise that, and as FM tap into that, without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So I'm not suggesting we stop talking to customers because that's critical, but we should certainly explore the variety of sources we use. And then, as I said, analysis, I think we're pretty poor at that. So we get this data and we just regurgitate it. Do we analyse it? And a word Kevin mentioned 2 or 3 times, I think Gareth mentioned it as well, analytics. And I think that's something FMs really need to get better at. So that's something I think that we should all focus on. So the next slide, I've stolen this from a company called DG Digital. I have given them acknowledgement. And this customer intelligence engine I really liked. And this is particularly for retail, the retail environment. But I think that this is something we could use in FM, just tailored slightly. So it's basically in a retail environment, they follow the customer. It's the classic of what are they clicking on. So you get those bespoke adverts on the side of Google. And, you know, okay, we're not going to get to that in FM, but no reason why we shouldn't look at what our customers do. We have clever smart cards, access control cards. We can see where they go in the building. We can see through catering what they're buying at the till. So we could start to use that data and be more analytical about how we provide our services. So I think that's something we should certainly look at. And if you look down the right-hand side, you've got a whole range of touch points that, again, we're very good at some of them. Everybody's great at email. We're getting better at the mobile device bit. The call centres are still very reactive and, I guess, sort of mechanical. And if you outsource them to a company, or sorry, not a company, a location, I should say, away from site, you do lose that local contact, that local knowledge. So I think it's important that when we do that, set that call centre arrangement up, that we don't lose touch with the guys on the ground. And if you can keep that service grounded in your building. So, for example, with us, we created FM service hubs in our reception, so we encourage our receptionists to be the help desks. So our help desk now is actually one person, but we've distributed the help desk to the reception desks, and that's working really well. We also encourage customers as they pass reception to log a call verbally. So they've got a problem with their cleaning or with their lighting or something like that. As they pass reception on their way to the restaurant, they can report it verbally. We take care of it, we log the call. When they get back to their desk, they have an email saying, your call's been logged. And that's been really, really popular. So those are the sort of things. But I think this engine's quite a clever way of just selling that whole picture of how people operate and how we could operate. So some people quote Jack Welch and Tom Peters. I found Toru Kanawu from TIS, that well-known Korean data company. Looking blank. So The reason I chose is, again, when you do these presentations, we all do it, you start Googling and you see what comes up and see what inspires you. I actually really liked what this guy said, and he probably said it in Korean, so I'm not even going to attempt, but that's the English translation. So basically, we in FM are a business partner, so our role is to actually continually contribute to the growth of your business, or the business. And the word I'm going to use later on, and I use it a lot in my current job and in past jobs as well, is we are a business enabler. So we are here to enable the business to operate. So I work for a pharma company. My whole purpose in being is to help us get medicines to patients as quickly as possible, to improve their quality of life and to improve their health. So whatever else I do, if I can't link it back, and sometimes it's tenuous, it's like the cleaner working at NASA, isn't it? What do? I help put people on the moon, that famous quote. And we should all try and do that, make sure that we can try and connect what we do to deliver goals for our business. And I think those three bullet points there, I think, are the things we need to understand first and foremost. So it's, what does our customer expect from us? What business requirement, what's the ultimate business requirement? And what tools have we got in the box to be able to deliver that? And you need to cover those three. And the bit in the bottom in red, so I'm going to leave data now. We need to turn data into intelligence and into information. And that's the analytical bit. And there are lots and lots of ways we can do that. So this is, again, slightly off at a tangent. This is moving away a little bit from, I guess, data and intelligence. But the principles, I think, are really important. So there's a really hackneyed phrase, buddy up, buddy systems, and so on. And buddy systems often have negative connotations. It's a bit too corny. But to me, it says it's the Ron seal, if you like, of business relationships. If you can get close to your business partners, your supply chain, if you can get close to your customers, you can deliver far more. I think as well, if you can do that at different levels. So if you can do that, the C-suite is very easy to target, and there's a chain of command which allows you to do that. But try and get your network much, much deeper into the business at all levels. So it's empowering engineers, cleaners, to make their local contacts and become information sources for you and your team. So that's really critical as well. And I think if you can do that properly, you'll start to gather information. Yes, you'll have your data about how many calls that department logged or that administrator logs. But if your teams can actually get close to that person, understand why they're logging so many calls, is there a recurring problem, you're going to get that fixed much more quickly. And that person's going to feel much more valued, much more connected to your service delivery. The service deliverer, the cleaner or the engineer, is going to feel much more empowered and much more valued themselves. And we don't do enough of that. We tend to go through the help desk, log a ticket, close the ticket down, faceless engineer turns up, I've adjusted the BMS, everything's fine. So I'm suggesting we should try and start to personalise our service a little bit more and involve the guys on the ground to build those relationships from the bottom. And we're very good at trying to get to the top, and we need to do more from the bottom, meet in the middle. I think in terms of accessing service, I mentioned again about access to help desks and so on. So again, the My Reception example is a really simple, I think, simple fix. May not work in every organisation, but if you can make access to your help desk very, very easy, and that could well be web pages, logging their own calls, talking to reception, post-it note on the door of your office if you're out, whatever works for you. But I would encourage you to look at that. I think as well, champions. I've seen this work very successfully at Shell. Each floor had a champion. That was a champion in terms of a customer who was a quick connection for the FM team to go to. Often it's the departmental administrator. Something, again, we seem to have lost a little bit in the industry, I think, in this pursuit of help desks and centralising things. So going back to basics a little bit is worth considering. The next two, absolutely tried. And one of my ex-colleagues, two of my ex-colleagues actually from Land Securities and BBC are here. We had FM surgeries at Media Village, and they were incredibly successful. We had brand new development of White City. We had, as you would expect, snags, challenges, early days. So we sent the FM team out with their laptops out from the FM office, sat them in some breakout coffee areas every Wednesday between, I don't know what time it was, Liz, it was something like for an hour every Wednesday. And incredibly successful. They were inundated in the first few weeks. They were logging calls religiously. The next week they'd come back. The person would say, thanks very much, that was fixed. And within a matter of probably about 3 to 6 months, we had to stop surgeries. No one was coming to see them. Why? Because we've been very successful. And the really important thing is it's because we've replaced the surgeries with the floor walking. So these same people that had established these relationships in the surgeries then started walking the floors, and they knew people then. Oh, hi Luigi, and hi Nikki, if you remember. And they said, great, I've got a problem. Great, let me deal with that for you. Fantastic. So snags were completed and closed down more quickly. We had happy customers, and we had an FM team who were known by the customers throughout the building. Number of help desk calls didn't drop, in fact they went up, but we were closing them down more quickly. But the important thing is we had that relationship with the customer. And technology, again, I think something we're doing at UCB, all our engineers have mini iPads, so they can pick up a call on the move, they can close a call on the move, they can access the BMS and stand by someone's desk and tweak the BMS and say, look, magic, you're getting cooler, aren't you? And then they say, of course, you have to wait, it'll take half an hour to feed through, but trust me, I'm an engineer, you know. But the point being, they've got the technology in their hands, they're empowered, they feel valued, they can access the BMS. So these sort of technologies and tools are available, and again, we need to make sure we're harnessing them as best we can. I have to take a drink now, sorry, apologies. Talk amongst yourselves for a few seconds. So, just continuing the theme about accessible systems and services, I've got, my team at UCB is thin client, as you call it, lots of outsourced people. Average age is probably, I guess, 30. So when I was doing a presentation, I showed some of the guys, I said, oh, I've put in a Ladybird book, and most of them went, a what? So when Gareth asked who should be conquering the world, I should have conquered the world twice over by now almost. But so anyway, Ladybird books. We need to provide services, Ladybird book style, easy to read, easy to understand, very, very simple, does what it says on the cover. We need to provide IT systems like Amazon, and this is a challenge to Nigel and Kevin and co. Intuitive, very easy to use. And I'll tell you about what we're doing with NJW, our roadmap, a little bit later, but it does involve going to the customer. So it needs to be very intuitive. And if you don't do that, people will be turned off, and you're back to where you were with the faceless help desk. So again, my challenge to all of us is to keep things simple and to keep things intuitive. Okay? So I'm going to move on now to talk a little bit about the laboratory, which I threatened to do in my title, and you're probably thinking he hasn't mentioned laboratories yet. So laboratories. So at UCB we have about 5,000 assets that we maintain, laboratory assets. So they can be anything from a set of balances to an antibody robotic system, which is about £1.3 million. So lots of equipment, big to small. Much of it is very, very critical. And there's an interesting quote, or source rather, from PerkinElmer. PerkinElmer are an equipment manufacturer and equipment installer, and they estimate a £10,000 loss of productivity to the business if a key piece of equipment fails. And in pharmaceuticals, you probably know this, but to get a drug to market typically costs £1.3 billion, and from discovery to launch can take anything up to sort of 7 years. And if you consider a patent lasts 10 years, you can see how challenging it is to make sure that when we get something good, we can get it through as quickly as possible to the patient, and obviously get a return on the R&D investment. So if we can reduce that £10,000 or reduce the incidence of that happening, then fantastic. So what we're trying to do at UCB is we're looking at technology to help us to do that, and to increase that resilience and business continuity in the laboratory. So there are a number of things I've listed in bullet point form there that we are using. So we're using the IP network as you would imagine. So that's plugging bits of equipment into the UCB IT network and monitoring those. So the scientists use that to monitor equipment. So if I took you around our laboratories, most people say, where are all the scientists? And I take them to the write-up office areas, and they're all in there. And what they do now is they set the experiments up on the equipment, and they disappear to the write-up area, and they monitor the equipment from there. So increasingly we're using the IT network, so you haven't got scientists necessarily standing over equipment. The electronic lab notebooks is along ELNs, as we call them, is basically tablet technology, the iPad. And again, what they're doing now is they used to, if you remember when you did, looking around the room, most of you did, I was going to be kind of harsh and say O-level. Most of you did GCSE probably. If you did an O-level science exam, you would conduct an experiment, and then you'd be sent back to your desk, and you'd write up what you did. And that's basically what happens in pharma laboratories still today. So the write-up bit now is captured in a tablet. So again, having a tablet means we can send the data straight to our IP system, intellectual property system. So we're storing the information for the patent application, if you like, as we go. Also, if there's a problem with the drug in later terms, we can go back electronically to those notes and see what the scientists did, see if there was an error in their formulas or whatever. So it's really a good technology. RFID I'm going to talk a little bit further about, and remote equipment management sort of combined. Telemetry is something we're looking to do with some of our key infrastructure. So we have big liquid nitrogen tanks. You probably see buildings, factories with the big white cylindrical tank of gas. So we have liquid nitrogen and liquid oxygen as well. And we have telemetry on those, so we can tell when the tanks, what levels the tanks are at, and it triggers an automatic delivery from Air Products. Those of you that have houses in the country might have a telemetry on a Calagas tank or such like. So that technology, again, we're using that already at the moment. And analytics and dashboard I'll come on to a bit later on. That's something we're working on very closely with NJW and indeed with PerkinElmer. So RFID, and interesting, this picture here is quite hard to see. I tried to find a picture of an odd use of RFID. So RFID is radio frequency ID, so it's tagging, the sort of thing you get on clothes in a shop. If you try and shoplift, the alarm goes off. This is an alligator in Florida that has been RFID tagged. So I thought that was quite a strange use of it. I couldn't quite understand or find out why they were tagging it and what it's for, but they can be used anywhere. So RFID tagging, this is something we're exploring at UCB, and we're looking at the moment, hoping to get approval from our executive for a new building to consolidate our 3 into 1. And one of the things we're looking at, and we've probably postponed at the moment on grounds of cost, is retrofitting to our buildings RFID tagging. So that's to tag every piece of scientific equipment and every piece of FM major plant. Now, why would we do that? We would do that to monitor it. So with portable assets particularly, if an asset's taken out of one room, it goes into another, the RFID tag picks it up, automatically updates the database. So the engineer who goes to fix that bit of portable kit gets a job ticket on his tablet, knows he's got to go to that laboratory and not that one. Sounds simple, that causes us all sorts of problems. Scientists are very good at picking something up and then, a bit like kids, putting it down and not putting it away after them, or not telling their colleague where they've left it. So tagging is going to help us with inventory accuracy, and it will also help us on a number of maintenance-related activities. So if you get a piece of equipment that is leaking, has reached a certain temperature, or a freezer, for example, a -80 freezer has dropped temperature, the tag can actually remotely tell the maintenance team via the BMS there's a problem with that bit of equipment. Powerful stuff. So I'm just going to show you some of the applications of tags as well. These are some of the tags that are available, and some of them are quite surprising actually. I think the ear tag's great. I think that must be for young offenders at Feltham. I'm not sure about that, but probably cattle, I imagine. But again, if you look at some of these, one of the things we're looking at certainly tags for temperature and leakage. So if you've got vending points, you can put an RFID tag on the floor behind the vending machine. If the vending machine leaks in the middle of the night, it sends a message to the engineering team or security. Much cheaper than a leakage detection system that you have to put in. So again, technologies we should be using probably more, and we're not. But you can see, so temperature, humidity, pretty much any condition change you can think of, there's an RFID tag. And the price is coming down, as you would expect with most technology, prices are falling. So we're looking at a lot of that. Telemetry I've mentioned already, so I'm going to skip that. So what we're doing with NJW, had to be a plug here for the guys, and they haven't asked me to put this in either. So we're developing a property and real estate portal called Dimensions, and I was overseas last week presenting it to my global colleagues, and it was very well received. So we're hoping to press ahead now and get this in full production globally. So we've used the UK as a pilot. And this effectively is the modules you can see listed there. We haven't switched them all on yet, and I hadn't even had a chance to catch up with Nigel yet on this, but my colleagues were very interested. They went straight to help desk when they saw this, even though we have a help desk system based on another product, which I won't mention. So that was quite interesting. So what we tried to do here is we tried to use it to start telling that story to the business and giving them business-related data I mentioned earlier on. So we've had to start from the traditional FM piece. So we're talking about real estate occupancy, we're talking about health and safety, we're talking about financial performance, projects, and waste management. So we're trying to tick CSR box in there as well. And what we've done when we started to develop, we're deliberately developing it with Nigel and the team in a way that we can then break it down to departments. So we can give the Vice President of Chemistry, for example, a tailored report for his area, just showing the space his team occupy, the waste his team generate, the health and safety compliance of his team. So we're very quickly going from that FM, here's another FM piece of lots of information, to make it powerful, local, specific data for those teams. Because only then can they help, that will help them influence their behaviours and the way they use our services. So we will become a better business enabler, and they will become a more educated client, and hopefully will make decisions that will help us keep our costs down. Because as a service provider, as you all know, it's the customers that drive your levels of spend. It's very difficult, fixed costs aside, it's very difficult to control your spend. So I'm just going to show you one screenshot of it. This is waste, for example. So we've listed waste by the waste codes, and again I've just took a screenshot. So what we want to get to is the ability to report, and this is real data for our Slough site. So we want to be able to report to the business locally what they're using, what waste they're producing, to our customers on the ground about how green we're being, how sustainable we're trying to be, and also ticking the report, the corporate report on CSR that we have to submit to Brussels. And to do those things at the moment would be sending them just spreadsheets that we can't really drill down into, and they're not very interesting and they're not really alive. And customers generally just say, well, yeah, another report from FM. So this is our attempt, this is the beginning of our attempt to make those reports more meaningful and more useful to the business.
Are you planning to have competitions between the lab directors? We've got less waste than you this month.
Yeah, I mean, we think so Wendy asked, are we going to will it generate some competition between departments in terms of their data? And yes, I think it will. What we hope will happen is, particularly on things like health and safety, so it's making sure that risk of safety observations are closed out promptly. We do hope that there will be an element of competition between departments to not be the one in red, as it were. Things like space, we're expecting this to be a tool to help us with our new building project, because we want to make that move to a more flexible workplace as opposed to a more, I mean, we have a lot of open plan, but we also have buildings where we have high degree of cellular space. So we're hoping that competition will extend to showing people the benefits of working more flexibly and making the space work better for them. Yeah. So my final slide, I'm not sure if we have time, I think we're okay, are we? So my final slide. The big bit in orange is my favourite message about it. We're an enabler, and it's a bit like I always say to my guys in the team, those who used to watch Harry Enfield, Mr. Chumley Warner had this awful sketch, it was very funny, it was awful, about women know your place, and if you remember that. I'm not going to text by anyone else, but the point I'm making is we FM need to know our place, and our place is to be a business enabler. If we want to influence the C-suite, knocking on the door saying we have a budget of this and a team of that isn't going to get us on the C-suite or airtime on the executive. What will get us airtime is being effective at what we do, an authoritative voice, a key part of the business, and then we'll be invited in. We won't have to bang on the door, we'll be brought in. So I think the key message there is be an enabler, use the data wisely, turn it into information, analyse it, get the right tools, empower your teams, and get that relationship with your customer as close as you possibly can get it. Thank you.
Any questions for Les? Remember to introduce yourself, Wendy.
Wendy Bishop, currently with Bolton Group, but it was just a remark really. When I worked at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, we moved from cellular to open plan, and one of the things we did, we visited numerous places, went up to Boots, Nottingham, where they have a great facility, and we asked the woman there, so are you planning to survey to find out pre and post move exactly what the outcome is? No, she said. Why bother? We won't use the data.
Yeah. It's funny, I spent yesterday morning at NATS, Air Traffic Control, and I was talking to their head of FM, and they've used the Leesman Index, which again, I guess is gathering momentum, and we're looking to use it as well, again, as a post-new building, pre-new building and ultimately a post-new building. And what Leesman does is it asks those questions, and it allows you to benchmark against other organisations. And I think again, what Leadsman gives you, if you don't do anything with it, is the answer to some set questions. And the Leadsman, many of you know Leadsman, but the questions are pretty set. You can add some extra ones in, but generally it's the same set of questions, and then they use that to benchmark your workplace against others. So if you use Leadsman carefully, and again, what I learned from Nats was they spent a lot of time before they launched the questionnaire analysing what they wanted to know, what information they wanted from it. And then the extra questions were added in, and they were able to design the questionnaire and also direct, structure it organisationally so they could get the right information about the right work groups and departments. So I think it's absolutely critical to do that. We did some post-occupancy evaluation work at Media Village at the BBC with Land Securities. And again, the data came back and nothing was really done with it. So yeah, it's almost easy to do the questionnaire piece, is what you do. It's my point about data versus information and the analytics element. So we're very good at capturing the data, but not maybe so good at the other bits.
I'm afraid I've got to do a quick plug. There are alternatives to Leadsman. Gordon does low facilities analysis, so we are there in a competition to Leadsman. I'm sorry.
Other tools are available as following Alice's leads. Yes, sorry, apologies. But yeah, I mean there are, and I think where Leadsman have been very good is getting out there first and being loud and proud. And I'm sure you guys are doing the same. But yeah, those tools, whatever you use. I mean, the POE tool we use at Land Securities was very different again. But all these tools are really useful as long as you turn that data into information.
Question at the back. Ron.
Roger Parslow, LMG. I was very interested, I can see the value personally of the communication with the business and your customers. How easy was it to get to secure the investment internally before you were able to invest in this type of IT solution? Because in terms of hard, tangible benefits, it must be quite hard.
It is. I mean, I think I mentioned, maybe I wasn't very clear, the RFID thing we've had to park because we were given the cost of about £1 million to retrofit RFID. So if you imagine fitting one of those shop-style loops to every doorway, or putting a sensor in every laboratory in the building, and then putting the tags on all the bits of kit and the labour to do that, it's an expensive operation. So what we're doing with the RFID project is we did a small project in one lab and it was very successful. It's now on our list for the new building to build it in. So if you can build the loops into the doorways already while you're constructing the building, far cheaper than retrofitting them. So, but you're right, in terms of, I've got a new boss as of about 3 weeks ago, and he's a CFO, Chief Finance Officer. And I was with him last week in a conference we had overseas. And he kept talking about, as you'd expect, return on investment, the business case. So the business case for something like this is we're gathering some data from the pilot, from the time saved, from the engineer going first time to the right bit of kit. The bit you can't cost and you can cost that quite easily, save number of jobs done in a day or save resource. Problem we've got is it's when we pick up a bit of kit that's leaking and the engineer intercepts it and fixes it, it's very difficult to work out how long would it have been taken for that leak to really damage the equipment, when would it have been picked up ordinarily. So there are some difficult issues. What we focused on is the theme of today, which is the resilience of the business, and making sure if that scientist goes in, if he's delayed by a day, that could delay a product to market by a day, which could cost you £1 million in revenue if you take it right to the ultimate example. But it's a very tricky argument to make, and it's very hard to get hard figures on it. But we'll keep trying.
Any more? Marcus?
Marcus Müller from the University of Exeter. How do you measure the essentially success or the you said that essentially some of the investment was successful and that people take it, like your customers pick it up quite soft.
I think first and foremost it's and this again it's perception and it's reputation of the department. So as I mentioned earlier about getting into the C-suite is easier when you are called into the C-suite, or and when you're doing something like a new building project, it's very easy. You're a compulsion. You have to be there if you like. But what we found is, and again, these are intangibles and difficult to quantify, but we found our chemistry team, for example, we've just refurbished some laboratories for them. We were involved without asking. Normally, we hear on the grapevine that they plan to spend some money and they've ordered some equipment, and then we get told, and then we try and come in and modify the laboratory and we had to provide argon gas to this particular piece of kit. And we didn't have an argon gas supply. So what we're finding now is, but this approach is starting to bear fruit in terms of we're involved from the very start. We're thinking about buying a machine. Can we work with you? Can we talk to you about this? Similarly now with headcount change, we're going through a process of insourcing and outsourcing. So we're pushing some work out and we're bringing work in. And again, we've got departments coming to us now proactively and saying, we're planning to this. We will be recruiting some people later in the year. We are bringing company X in later in the year. And in the past, that's been the last minute thing. Someone starting next week, can we find a desk for them? So we're finding the benefits at the moment, rather than being financial, are very much building on that relationship. So we're getting in earlier on projects, on recruitment plans, which is helping us with the new building project as well.
Okay, time for one last one. I've got one. Les, you're working in pharmaceuticals now and worked at the BBC, completely different industries. Do you see any different culture in how your internal customers behave from, say, a media company to a pharmaceutical?
Yeah, I think, funny enough, I joined UCB about 5 years ago so now, and I think 6 weeks in we had a power cut and we locked out our main research building. And I was running around, and I'd come from, so a couple of years before I'd been with the BBC, worked for Land Security's Trillium. And I managed the West London estate, so it included the end television, I picked up Television Centre in the end as well, Media Village, Elstree, and those sort of areas. And we had power outages at the BBC, brand new building as you'd expect, you have problems, we lost power, we had fire evacuations, and we were in danger of taking the BBC off air, and I'm not exaggerating because you have this 15-minute window where the fire brigade allow the play-out guys to remain in their studio, who were basically directing what you see on screen. And after 15 minutes, they're out as well. And then once the program that's running is finished, without some manual intervention, you may be looking at a blank screen. So if I contrast the two, the BBC, as soon as the alarm's gone, I had a lady called Pam Masters, who's some in the room, and no, Pam was lovely, but very straightforward woman, straight, plain-speaking woman, in my ear saying, "When can we go back in? When can we go back in?" And the brigade hadn't even arrived because and so that was that. It was like broadcast is king. Every second is vital. If we lose this, we can never ever get it back because that second, that minute's gone. Go to pharmaceuticals. We had a power cut, knocked the whole building out for 40 minutes. We had kit not on UPS because the scientists hadn't thought to put it on UPS, which ended up, one piece of kit cost £30,000 to repair because it was powered out suddenly and it didn't like being switched off suddenly. So I was there going, my guys, let's get the power back on, do this. I was in BBC mode. Next morning I came in, we had a management meeting, just so happened, and I sat there ready to be kicked up the backside. And it was like, oh, well, these things happen, and they're just so focused on the science. It was like, yeah, well, and the other good thing is, back to the relationship thing, and even those early days from my team, the business trusted us. So if we said, look, we've done everything we can to prevent a reoccurrence, this is happening, that's happening, they said, fine, okay, fine. So the different cultures is very, very noticeable. And the other thing I've noticed is, I worked in financial services as well for a while, everybody has their whatever it is critical. So the BBC, we had broadcast critical. With the banks, it's the traders, isn't it? It's keeping trading running. In pharmaceuticals, they're just so focused on the patient and the science that if things disrupt them for a day or two, okay, well, let's get back to the science. And it's quite refreshing, but I still find it hard. I'm the one probably highest up going, let's get this fixed, and everyone else around me is much calmer. So and I'm the crisis leader, so that works quite well.
Okay, Leslie Gorman.
Thank you.